everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome back to another edition of Window Watch. Of course, we've done a few of these over the summer so far. The rumours keep sort of building, I suppose, as we enter the sort of pre-season stage almost. The players back for testing today, of course. So imagine these rumours are only going to grow from now. Adam Harvey joined by Southwell and Samuel Seaman. Lots of stuff to get into. I think the one that's probably most topical, maybe around conversation on socials this morning, we'll get straight into, and it all centres around a certain Brazilian. Here he is. Gabriel Sara, I think it's the Roma end, La Gazzetta dello Sport suggesting that Roma are going to try and sign Gabriel Sara in the next coming days. 14 goals, 13 assists last season. Of course, Ben Napper last week in the press conference speaking around kind of him and sort of maybe not necessarily just him, but Sara, Rowe, Sargent, all about their futures and maybe Norwich's requirement to sell this summer some of those assets. With all that, Connor, I suppose, where are we at with Gabriel Sara and these rumours? Can Norwich fans, sort of, I suppose, stop panicking a little bit?
I don't even really. I've spent the majority of the morning trying to source the actual story that this has come from, and I can't find it anywhere. I can't find any mention of Gabriel Sara on La Gazzetta dello Sport at all. So if anyone can find that and wants to point me to it, then that's fine. But I think that probably sums up just about where we are with this. Nothing at the moment, and to be fair, I don't think the report says there is anything at the moment. I think it's expected to ramp up, isn't it, or something along those lines, which is almost my favourite type of transfer stories. That is when we get to the stage of people preparing bids and stepping up interest and all of this. So yeah, I think this is not one to lose any sleep over at this stage. I think we had the report earlier in the week, which was a fairly established Brazilian journalist talking about Roma. I think it's pretty widely known that there is interest there from them, but we're not at a stage that report this morning, wherever it has come from, seemed to suggest. So he's at Colney as we speak. The club have posted some pictures of him in some magnificent shorts, returning to and flip flops. By the way, he's just strolled in off Holcombe Beach, I think, back into the building. So yeah, look, is there going to be interest in him this summer? Yes. Will there be interest in from Roma? Probably. Crystal Palace, another one to throw in that have been linked and are thought to have a real interest in him. So, yeah, I think there is a scenario this summer that plays out that he is the one that departs. I think a couple of weeks ago, the feeling was that he was probably least likely of the three. Obviously, things shift and change and are pretty fluid. I think what we see, we've probably seen a little bit of this with Marcelino Nunez, I'm sure we'll come on to a little bit later, is at this stage of the summer, which is we're still in early summer, really. We've not hit July yet. Obviously, as someone points out in the comments, free agents and whatnot will shift a bit more next month. You tend to get a lot of kite flying, where people are just sort of throwing things up in the air and throwing stuff onto walls to try and see if they can get anything to stick from either ends and see if they can try and get a bite. And that can be agents sometimes, that can be clubs sometimes, it can be players sometimes. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of that going on. I don't think in terms of pure substance that we're anywhere near Gabriel Sara landing in Rome and being unveiled as a Roma player. But yeah, going back to my initial point, I cannot find for the life of me at all any story from La Gazzetta dello Sport. And there's a print edition, it could be in there, I don't know. But certainly online, there's absolutely no reference of this anywhere. So yeah, I think it's one to take with a rather large pinch of salt.
Yeah, I suppose with those rumours and Crystal Palace as well, I think being linked so far this summer, Sam, do you think this is one that's going to rumble on, I suppose, deeper on into the summer? Maybe a sort of a Milo Rashica type, a few others that have sort of maybe been of higher profiles that maybe have, it's taken a little while for these deals to eventually surface.
Yeah, I think it's your classic sort of transfer window that everyone likes to follow. And when a player does as well as Gabriel Sara did for Norwich last season and the team that he's part of doesn't get promoted, there's always going to be that speculation. There's always going to be that intrigue around where that player goes. And I think it is one that's probably going to go quite deep into the summer. It does feel like it maybe hasn't been a super active one yet, not just for Norwich, but also across the board. And it does feel like maybe some of those dominoes need to start to fall before clubs of the profile of especially sort of Crystal Palaces towards the bottom end of those big divisions are able to spend or at least want to spend the sorts of fees it's going to take to get Gabriel Sara out of Carrow Road this summer. So, yeah, I think it is one where it will take a little bit of time. There might even be some outings in pre-season for Sara before anything gets confirmed, if it does get confirmed, of course. But with the financial situation at Norwich. If they do get a huge bid for him, it's going to be difficult for them to turn that down. So, yeah, I think it's one definitely to keep an eye on. It's not one that I would be hugely optimistic about as a Norwich fan, but equally, he's somebody who looks pretty happy at the club. He's not likely to agitate for a move this summer, and I think he's a player that any coach would love to work with, and I'm sure Johannes Torup would love to work with him as well. So, yeah, I think it's a bit of a win-win scenario for Norwich. Obviously, if he does stay, they probably need to offload one of those other key valued assets in Josh Sargent and Jonathan Rowe. But yeah, I think they win sort of either way, really. So it's probably a scenario they're quite comfortable with, even with their financial situation. And that means they won't be taking the earliest available bid. They won't be getting this done as quickly as they possibly can. And yeah, I think it might rumble on, and there may well be plenty more speculation of this type where, as Connor said, it's getting to the stage of preparing bids and getting closer and stepping up interest, which is always interesting to see and not especially tangible. But yeah, I think you're right, and that this could rumble on and become a little bit of a saga.
Staying on the theme of Norwich City current midfielders that have been linked away, I think there's a couple that we can get into. We'll start with a Scotsman who's, of course, just been knocked out of the Euros. Here he is, Kenny McLean, of course, been linked once again for about the 500th time, I think, to Rangers this summer. Yeah, of course, player of the season last campaign. I think, I sort of mentioned these links have seemingly surfaced every summer. We know he's a boyhood Rangers fan. I think there's probably that tie-in. I think he spoke previously maybe about his desire in the future to move back to Scotland with all this. And I think there's a report saying that maybe some talks might soon begin. Connor, is that one that you can see, happening, I suppose, moving forwards?
Yeah, I might soon go to the shop and buy something. It's funny, isn't it? The language used around the transfer window. It's good actually, because I know when this link comes out that I need to put my sunglasses on and start applying sun cream because it's summer. So that's always good. Like you say, I think it's about the 5th summer in a row that we've had this link. And yeah, look, I think it's always interesting. And like you say, I think that's probably fueled partly by the fact that Kenny McLean has made pretty clear publicly that he's a Rangers fan, and if you're a Rangers fan, you get linked to that club, given the size of it, and you want to play for it as well. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting one, not least because of where Norwich and McLean are in their respective journeys. I think the initial reports, which were from the Daily Record a week or so ago now, when they came out, were sort of suggesting that there had been interest from Rangers last summer around the time that Leeds were interested, and obviously Norwich then moved to sign him on a contract, and he's got 2 years left with an option as it stands. So that's quite a level of security that he has at Norwich City. I'm not sure if at this stage of his career he could go and get that somewhere else. Whether he could at Rangers and whatnot remains to be seen. And then of course I guess there's the element of what the future holds for him. I think we've all been talking about the experienced players, haven't we, since Torup was appointed, because there's been so much of the discourse around youth and pathways and integrating academy products. I think everyone's sort of been looking at the cohort of players that Norwich have: Shane Duffy, Ashley Barnes, Kenny McLean, others as well who are sort of in and around 30 or even the wrong side of it, and wondering what it holds for them. But I think in terms of dressing room, he's such an important figure, and I think if you're a Torup, he's the kind of person that you would want on side, even if it's not in as significant a playing role as was the case last season. And I'd probably put Ashley Barnes in this bracket as well. If you've got someone in your dressing room that can carry those messages, that can support those young players, because Norwich City aren't going to be able to play with 11, 23, 24-year-olds. That's just not realistic. In the same way, it's not realistic to have the amount of experienced players that they had last year. It's always about balance. And as we've said a few times, his captain at Nordsjælland was 35 and I think was about 6 months older or younger than him. So I think there is a role to play for Kenny McLean at Norwich. Equally, I wouldn't particularly be surprised if that interest did become firmer at some stage and we got beyond preparing for bids into actual bids being put on the table. I think Kenny McLean probably would want to pursue that at this stage of his career, to return to Scotland to play for Rangers. And if I'm honest, I think if there was a situation that could pan out where everyone could shake hands and agree on something in that circumstance, then I think it would be useful if Norwich could get a pretty decent fee for him. Remember, they signed him on a free all those years ago, so that would be profit on a player who's the wrong side of 30, which is pretty rare, I think, in football. And I think the position that Norwich are in now, and that goes for all of the players, and probably leans into why Marcelino Nunez is maybe or some of the conversations around him are being had at the moment, because I think they're in a position where if a money offer gets put on the table, I think it's one that they would have to consider. That doesn't mean they don't have to accept it, and it doesn't mean that it's one that they need to push north, but they do need to make sales this summer, as we've said, I think from probably a few months ago, really, and they'll need to make major sales as well. And I think, for me, I see this as a bit of a win-win on Kenny McLean, because if they keep him, you've got a player there who I think had his best season at Norwich City last year, all of the ones that he's had, in a very specific role that David Wagner gave him, in fairness. And then if you, on the flip side, if Rangers do come in, if there is a bid, if he does leave, then you've got some pretty good money, I would suggest, for a player who's the wrong side of 30. So, yeah, I think either side of this is probably a little bit of a win-win for Norwich. I guess so much of it will probably hinge on what Kenny McLean wants to do as well, for all of the reasons that you've outlined. But at this stage, yeah, nothing concrete, and nothing in terms of, situations unfolding imminently on that. I think it's one, as it always is over the summer, just one to watch at this stage, and we'll see what happens. He's obviously on holiday at the moment after the Euros, as is Angus Garr and as is others as well. Grant Hanley, of course, who I thought had a pretty good Euros actually. So those players will come back a little bit later in July, and that is probably when the conversations maybe will turn from this stage, where they're more sort of speculative, maybe into something a little bit more definitive. We'll see.
Yeah, one of those midfield partners last season, as you mentioned, Marcelino Nunez, of course. A couple of weeks ago, Sam, we were on here sort of talking about it. It was kind of a fresh report then. Trabzonspor over there in Turkey were interested, maybe submitted a fairly insulting bid, I think, for what Norwich fans maybe felt in terms of him, given his age profile and sort of what happened, I suppose, at the latter stage of last season. Since then, of course, I think Trabzonspor have signed a couple of midfielders. John Lundstrom, formerly of Rangers, Sheffield United, I think he's joined them. Ozan Tufan, of course, known through the Championship for his time at Hull, and I think he was at Watford as well previously. With all that and maybe this interest, can you see this moving forwards now? Obviously, they've addressed a couple of midfield issues there. Is that one to keep an eye on?
Yeah, it does feel like it's dying down a little bit now. It hasn't advanced from where it was really the last time we spoke from a sort of Norwich perspective. Obviously, they will be having conversations within their footballing departments about their various targets. But I think there are two things you can take from those signings they've made in midfield. And that, first of all, is the obvious one in terms of how many midfielders do you need. If you've already signed two, I don't see what sort of role they could really offer Marcelino Nunez, or how far down the pecking order that would push the other players that they've already signed. I also think when you look at the fees involved, obviously John Lundstrom on a free, and Ozan Tufan for I think 1.7 million was the fee reported. That tells you about the amounts of money they're willing to spend this summer, and probably why they submitted such a seemingly low bid for Nunez in the first place. It doesn't feel like that reflects a club that could necessarily jump straight from around the 3 million mark up to sort of 6 and 7 and the numbers that Norwich could consider or would consider. I don't think that was just Trabzonspor sort of lowballing and seeing if they could get him for as cheap as possible. I think that was genuinely a reflection of what they can afford in this market, as are those two signings. And with how much Nunez is worth to Norwich, how much he is worth actually in the market at large, I think it's hard to say that that's something that's going to get over the line in future. And obviously there could be other clubs interested. It doesn't necessarily mean that Marcelino Nunez will absolutely 100% be a Norwich player at the end of the window, but there haven't been too many links. I think the last one I really remember was Brighton last summer, and it doesn't feel like there's going to be that level of interest in him this summer. So I think maybe one when Marcelino Nunez fans can relax a little bit, because it doesn't feel like that's especially likely to progress, and we'll see what comes up over the rest of the summer. But he is somebody who really fits that profile of player that Torup will want to work with, that Torup's system sort of suits. And I think it would be great news for Norwich if they can keep him. So, yeah, I think they'll need much higher fees, as we spoke about last week, to consider than what Trabzonspor initially offered. And in terms of that club, it does feel pretty unlikely now, yeah.
Yeah, I see the comments and questions flooding through. There's a few kind of around Kenny McLean. Duncan Atkinson on Facebook saying, I think Kenny McLean would be, I'm assuming that means good one to sell, but keep the other major players. at the club. Peaky saying 200k, wasn't it, due to sign in January and loaning back. So yeah, kind of correcting us up there. Dan Mayhew, he's only 32, just such a leader, and just had his best season. Also, why would he leave at the point when he's playing in the Prem in Reach? If it was for him, I'd go after the contract ends. Staying on the theme, I suppose, of midfielders, but maybe one that's been linked incoming wise. Bobby Clark from Liverpool. There was a report, I think last weekend, maybe now, that Norwich are rumoured to be in for him on loan. I think there was also links to RB Leipzig and RB Salzburg. Obviously, bigger clubs in terms of their relative leagues. But I think look at maybe Hull having Tyler Mawson last year on loan, and I think various other Liverpool players have had sort of successful spells in the Championship. Maybe that's one to keep an eye on. 12 senior appearances for the Reds last campaign, 2 assists, 1 goal. Of course, son of a former Norwich City connection in Lee Clark. Connor, what do you make of that rumour? I mean, obviously, you look at kind of younger players. Maybe Norwich have had some success with that in the past, the likes of Ollie Skip. Is that a route you want to see them maybe go down this summer?
Yeah, I think it's a route that they need to go down in a better way than they have done. More so last season. I was a little bit surprised they didn't make more use of the loan route last season, if I'm being completely honest. But that probably speaks more to the type of player and profile of player that David Wagner wanted above anything else. I think this summer does feel, particularly now they've got Jose Cordoba over the line, it does feel now, certainly before a major outgoing, as we've mapped out, that it's going to be about players that they can get in on free transfers, and that could be creatively free as well. And by that I mean players who are under contract but maybe can be sought for either a very small fee or for free, or loan additions. So I guess he would kind of fit where they are probably at in this sort of stage 1 of the transfer market, and then stage 2, obviously post sale, would then, you would imagine, allow them to have a little bit more to play with, but still not enough to maybe replicate what they've spent for Jose Cordoba. So purely on those merits, it is one that does add up and does make sense, and would fit in an area of the park that I think they'll be quite keen to add to, which is central midfield. I think if they could get one, we saw obviously the links with Jonathan Varane in January. That clearly shows, and I know Bobby Clark's a little bit more attacking than Varane, but that shows that there is an area of the pitch there that they feel they do need to add to and improve on. I guess the one thing about the number 6 element is Liam Gibbs, and whether he is one that Johannes Hoffer Torup will look at in pre-season as maybe being one that can mould in that. But yeah, I think actually you look at the midfield more generally, what does it lack? It probably lacks number 10s specifically. Norwich don't have really out-and-out 10s. I know Sara played there towards the end of the season, but he also played on the left and as an 8, and we probably think of him more as an 8 rather than a 10. They lack definition really in terms of an out-and-out attacking midfielder, and probably an out-and-out defensive midfielder as well. So there is probably a little bit of margin around the area, around the edges to add to. So I think he would add to that. He would add good depth. I think he seems to be very highly rated at Liverpool. But then, like, as you say, the caveat of the clubs that have come in for him, and Salzburg are managed by Pep Linders now, who was Jurgen Klopp's assistant. So there's an obvious link there. And we have seen previous loan deals with the clubs. Or I think Fabio Carvalho went there, didn't he, for a period of time, and didn't get too much game time before going to Hull. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting one to monitor at this stage. I think, again, as I said, there's a lot of kite flying that goes on at this stage of the window from agents and representatives, and I'm always a bit cautious when we get links that mention 3 or 4 clubs at once, as they did for Lassana Diarra, who was the defender, which seemed to have basically every club in France and the Championship mentioned in a report. So yeah, I think it's definitely one to watch, because he is sort of the profile of kind of player that I could see Norwich going for in the market, in terms of being young, being at a big club, being probably available for loan this summer. Whether it's going to be him specifically, in truth, I don't know at this stage. It's not one that I've got any sort of intel or know-how on at this stage. But yeah, it's the type of player, as I'm sure we'll come to, as the Brazilian left-back is, in terms of profile and market and fit. All of those things feel like it is sort of within Norwich's reach. So yeah, one to watch, and let's see what happens. And like you say, there's an obvious connection there with Lee Clark. I know Sam's spoken to him relatively recently as well, but he is always glowing about Norwich as a football club. And I'm sure that if Bobby picked up the phone and said, "Look, Dad, what do you make of Norwich?" I'm sure he'd get a very positive reference and a very positive recommendation. So yeah, it does Norwich no harm at all.
Yeah, you mentioned the left back. Quite a few questions around him. Dylan saying, "What about the left back, Van der Laan?" Tom Carlton as well. Carlton, sorry, on Facebook. Anything in the rumours there? Kieran as well. Is it a realistic link? Obviously, we've done business with Palmeiras. Of course, that was the Pedro Lima deal, and there was the tie-up, I think, between the two clubs previously. 21 years of age, left back, 64 senior appearances. I think he's been linked to Chelsea, AC Milan in the past. Obviously, clearly fairly high profile player over there in Brazil. We know Norwich's links in Brazil. They've got scouts on the ground down there. He's clearly a player they probably would have come across. Sam, with all that context, one to maybe watch.
Yeah, it feels like the profile of player that Norwich will definitely be interested in. I think if you show them a 21-year-old left back in, which is the position, obviously, I think we all know needs the most urgent addressing. And then you throw in the age and the quality of player that he clearly is. He looks to be quite an attacking fullback as well, which would lean into a possession-based philosophy, even though Tzolis has tended to tuck one fullback into the back three. So if he did sign, it would probably require a little bit of an adjustment, because at Nordsjælland it was Martin Fraser, actually, who is a name obviously we're all familiar with. He was the one tucking in on the left, and then the right back bombed on. So with this one, it would probably mean Tzolis having to reverse his system, but that wouldn't be a drastic change. And I don't think that rules it out. Obviously, as I think some of the comments have mapped out, the financial element of it is the most difficult gap to bridge, in terms of the fact that with all of those elements involved, he's somebody who is going to command a pretty decent fee. He's, by all accounts, a more significant player for Palmeiras than Pedro Lima was. And obviously the fact that Norwich signed him on a loan for the under-21s showed how difficult it was to try and get a permanent deal over the line. They weren't going to just roll over and let one of their assets go for less money than they wanted. And that will apply even more for Van der Laan, who will be worth more to them and will be a more important player for them than Pedro Lima was at the time. So for that reason, it feels like one that maybe won't happen especially soon. Both me and Connor have talked about the fact that it will need probably one of those key players selling before they can invest a decent sum in a player. And I think it will be a fairly decent sum if they're able to attract him to Carrow Road. So in terms of the profile of player, everything about him and how it fits with the direction the club are now going in, Ben Napper's priorities, Torup's tactics, I think it would work really, really well. But we could probably say that about a lot of left backs across the world. It doesn't mean that Norwich can afford all of them. And I think that is maybe where it might hit a bit of a stumbling block. But we'll see later in the summer if Norwich do get some funds to play with, whether that's someone they go for. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was, to be honest. Yeah,
Finley asking, as said elsewhere, I presume Ruddy is a cross. Of course, I think we've sort of maybe known for a while, maybe that if he was going to depart Birmingham, there would have been an interest on his part to join Norwich City again. Of course, he lives locally. I think that probably that commuting element and maybe being away from his family. Of course, his son is in the academy as well. There's a clear tie-up with the club. Sad maybe that's not one that Norwich want to pursue, Connor, or maybe more realistic given, they've already got Angus Gunn, they've got George Long. It's probably limited game time for him here anyway.
Yeah, and that's the type of role that he would have taken. And like I said, I think there would always be an interest in seeing it. He still lives locally. His family still live locally. As you mentioned, his son is about to become a full-time academy scholar. So there's clearly lots of routes here for him. And why wouldn't you get your representative to at least pick up the phone when you've got that opportunity? But yeah, the reality is I think Norwich have two keepers who, for this level, Angus Gunn is one of the best at the level, and we know that. And George Long, I think, as a number two, is a little bit harshly done by most people. I think he's fine for sort of the role that he has and whatnot. And I think also the way that Tzolis wants to play, and that is going to mean that goalkeepers have to play out of the back. They have to be competent with their feet. That's not really an area that we massively associated with John Ruddy's game. He's a very, very good goalkeeper, and he's shown that you don't get an England cap whilst playing for Norwich if you're not a very good goalkeeper, and absolute legend here by all parts. But yeah, I think for where he's at in his career, where Norwich are at in their journey, I think it's that never really felt like a natural fit if we part the sentiment and we're talking about a 37-year-old goalkeeper who got released from a club that was relegated. If it wasn't John Ruddy, I don't think we'd be talking about it in those terms. And that's not to be disrespectful to John Ruddy, who I think was again very good at Championship level. I just think for where Norwich are at the moment, it's not a fit. So yeah, if that is the case and those conversations have been had, then I think I can understand why Norwich and Ben Napper in particular would knock them back, because that would then basically require more work. You'd then have to try and get George Long out of the building, and I don't really see the benefit of doing that at this stage when you've got someone there who's quite happy to provide what he provides and is popular and is well liked and trains really well and works really hard. And also I think we saw it in some of the cup games. I know people want to talk about the run in the league, and he got thrown into to the deep end a little bit with that, I felt. In some of the cup games, I remember him making a terrific save at Bristol Rovers in the cup replay, which basically saw Norwich then earn that fourth round tie against Liverpool. He's produced some pretty decent performances in the cup. So
Fulham, he was really good.
Fulham, yeah. So for what he is at this stage, I don't really see any need to upgrade or to change, particularly then when you've got obviously a group of young goalkeepers behind. You've got Anson, you've got Reyes, you've got Archie Mayer, some really, really talented young goalkeepers sort of waiting in the wings. If you're then bringing the 37-year-old to add 3 goalkeepers, well, we had so much conversation last year about blocking pathways. You're doing that again, so you're not making any progress, and that's before maybe we get into the financial element. I think John Ruddy also will get a really good club, and there's been some links in the national media about potentially going up to Newcastle and doing sort of their third goalkeeping role. That would be fantastic at this stage of his career for him, and I'm sure on very good. Very, very good money as well. So, yeah, I wish him all the best. And I'm sure we will see him back at Norwich one day in some capacity, maybe after he's finished his playing career. But, yeah, for me, that doesn't feel like, even if he would have wanted it and it would have been brilliant from obviously our perspective and a story perspective and the fans as well from a sentiment perspective, I'm not sure it's right for probably either party at the moment.
Yeah, of course, there's been a transfer maybe rumbling on that's former Norwich City player. I think a few fans maybe got a bit more of an interest in whether there's a sell-on clause. I know you've done a story this morning, Sam, maybe outlining that. Joe asking, will there be any sell-on fee coming for Godfrey's move to Atalanta? Harry, of course, stating there is no sell-on money. I just want to explain that situation, Sam, and kind of where that's at.
Yeah, it's a similar situation with most players at most clubs, really, in that when you sell a player on, especially one who maybe is of a decent age and expected to progress on, that the sell-on fee will be for profit, and that whatever percentage it is will be part of the profit that the new club makes. Obviously, Everton are selling Godfrey for, I think, around 10 million is what's been reported. Norwich sold him for 20 million, rising to 25. So there won't be any profit in it for Everton at the moment, and that unfortunately means no extra cash for Norwich from the Godfrey deal. I mean, technically there is a way where it could happen. So if they put a 20% sell-on fee in the deal to go to Atalanta, and then Atalanta sell him for hundreds of millions, then Norwich will get some of that profit. But obviously, it's highly unlikely that they're going to make between 10 and more than 10 and 15 million extra from that deal with Atalanta. So it does feel unlikely that Norwich will profit any more from that deal for Ben Godfrey, unfortunately. But that is how most of those deals are structured. Interestingly, that's not how the Tzolis deal will work out. So the sell-on will just be part of the fee this summer. But that is a very rare case, and usually it is profit. So that's why Norwich unfortunately won't get any uplift from Godfrey's move. But it does look actually a really good move for him to go to a Champions League club, having struggled to get game time at Everton. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he gets on.
Yeah, before we dip into the comments and questions, maybe just away from transfers, sort of, I suppose, directly, Andy Hughes' move to Leicester looks like it's sort of soon going to be coming to a conclusion. It's still dragging on a little bit into the later part of the week when we maybe expect it to be a little bit before now. Connor, what do you make of that departure for Norwich City? How big an impact will it have? I suppose it maybe opens the doors to Johannes Hoff-Torup to sort of maybe bring in somebody that he wants to come in and directly impact this group, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the latest on that, we're still waiting for Leicester as it stands to close that off and to get it done. So it might be one now, given the day it is, and we're in the summer and weekends are cherished by those who work in football. It may well be one that drags into next week now. But yeah, look, it is a loss, and Sam did a very good piece the other day, and you only have to look at the impact that he had and the improvement that Norwich recorded on set pieces last season. They of course as well, and I think this needs to get mentioned. They have Billy Wright, I think is his name. I might have got that wrong, who is a set piece analyst at the club, who works very closely with Andy Hughes and has played a real key role in terms of formulating and orchestrating and coming up with and creating a lot of those set pieces that we saw. So it isn't just, Andy Hughes leaves and the set piece department kind of falls apart, so to speak. There is already components within that. It will just allow somebody else to come in and head it up. And yeah, I think with anything, particularly given all of the change that has happened this summer, I don't think it's a bad thing really to have somebody else, a fresh face, a fresh voice, someone maybe who Johannes Hoff-Turup has an input and bringing into the staff. That's never a bad thing, I don't think, at this stage. Is it a loss in terms of coaching talent? Of course, because you only have to look at the numbers and the data. That tells you that Norwich City were very good in that area, and not just offensively either, which is the highlight. And we'll talk about the goals from set pieces. The one at Leicester, which was a carbon copy of the Manchester City one, which was very creative. There were numerous others as well. I know Sam referenced the ones against Millwall last season after Alan Russell's departure. There's been a lot of really creative set pieces. They did, for example, a lot of work in kind of which areas of the box to hit from crosses, and they discovered that a lot of the data suggested that if you put the ball to the front post and sort of won the first contact, then your percentage of scoring from a set piece sort of skyrocketed. So that's all very, very in-depth, really innovative work that Norwich have. We know, I think we're seeing in the game more widely. I know Ange Postecoglou had to field a lot of questions about it towards the end of the season. Set piece coaches are rising in football, and kind of these specialism coaches that we see. Liverpool obviously had a throw-in one for a period. So it's obviously it's a loss, and he's someone who had a connection with the club in terms of playing as well. And I know because he told me on occasion how much it meant to him as a football club. So I don't think it's a decision that he would have taken lightly, but it's a Premier League opportunity. He will know Steve Cooper. I'm sure he's still very close with Stuart Webber. Stuart Webber's very close with Steve Cooper. I'm sure there would have been a conversation there and a recommendation made perhaps. So going to be really interesting to see how he gets on. And for Norwich, it obviously creates a vacancy for Turup to add to his coaching staff. And that's not a bad thing, I don't think, because the more voices that you can have which are aligned with the way that he wants to play, the better, I think, in terms of that messaging and that continuity that then bleeds into the playing group, I think.
A couple of questions on that. Jeff was saying, any idea on how much the compensation is?
Not a clue.
And Finley saying, was he the loan manager as well?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. So obviously he was, and then he got moved on to coaching stuff. And so the loan manager role kind of got split sort of across a few people, but he was one of maybe the ones that took. I know John Massinho referenced him a lot as the one as their sort of point of contact for speaking to Abu Kamara, and he was across quite a few of the other loanees. So with the help of a few others towards the end. I know Neil Adams did a bit on it, Steve Weaver did a bit on it, on sort of the younger lads going and watching them and keeping in contact. So it was kind of split, if that makes sense.
Got a question here on YouTube. I've read in the papers here in Sweden that Nicholas Eliasson has been linked with Norwich. Any substance in that? Of course, formerly of Bristol City, Swedish international, I believe. Is that one? I think earlier on in the summer it was linked.
Yeah, that's one. This somewhere in the ether for me, because it was a little while ago, wasn't it? So
I know I've got a list of players that Norwich have been linked with this summer, and he's definitely on it because that's a name I recognise. So I don't think that I think I did a bit of digging around that at the time, and it was kind of suggested that he was eyeing a new contract or something, but it's not one that I've explored for quite a few weeks. I don't think so. I've got nothing new on that really.
Yeah. I suppose with your list, Dan Mayhew makes a good question. Semi-joke question. What has been the silliest transfer link involving Norwich so far in the transfer window? One you either just laugh at because it's ridiculous, or one you know it's just made up?
I saw Danny Ward. Well, I'm going to look so silly now if he ends up...
The goalkeeper?
Yeah. The Leicester goalkeeper. I don't think... If it was like a loan or even a free, then I don't know, maybe it would be a free. I don't know. I didn't do too much digging into it, which probably tells you how seriously I took that one. But I'd be very shocked if Danny Ward, the Leicester goalkeeper, ends up a Norwich player. There have been a few in there, but that's the one that stands out to me.
There's nothing that really springs to mind. Not like serious ones. Obviously, you get the ones on social media. I remember seeing a few for Oliver Skip, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I don't think I've seen any that have made me think, oh my goodness, well, we haven't quite reached that sort of peak end of the transfer window yet, which is a little bit of a shame. You tend to get that more a bit when you're in the Premier League rather than when you're sort of where Norwich are, I would suggest.
I think that's one area where we've suffered from Turup's appointment, because now Norwich are known again as quite a smart club that has maybe some more detailed recruitment and looks in lesser known markets. So you get less of those fantastically enjoyable and unrealistic links, unfortunately.
Finley asking, I think you sort of did touch on this briefly, Connor, as the 1st of July is near, is there any chance Norwich announce a few free agents soon?
Yeah, I think inevitably you see when clubs return to pre-season training that things do get a bit livelier, because there's obviously more people in more places at one time, and that enables you to really focus. And Norwich have had, Ben Napper's had holidays and Torup's had holidays, and recruitment team, people have had holidays. So then trying to get everyone on the same page and picking things up at different time, and coupled obviously with the fact that players who are on frees will have had holidays as well. So Martin Fraser, I know we mentioned him a little bit earlier, who's obviously someone that Tzolis would like to bring to Norwich City if that's possible. I know that he's just returned actually to Denmark to sort of train with Nordsjælland to keep himself fit. So and he's obviously confirmed that he's moving abroad. So that's one to watch. He's got a few offers in a few various places. So I could see that, whether it's Norwich or elsewhere, kind of coming to a conclusion pretty soon. I'm sure there will be others as well that they're working on, because once you get into that period where clubs start training for pre-season, those who aren't on contracts will want to get that through and get in the building somewhere as quick as they can. And like I say, you get sort of waves of transfer window. I often think the first wave, as we kind of saw last summer, to be fair, is that free transfers window, really is what it feels like to me. And then obviously you get the one sort of player trading between clubs, maybe a major sale as well, but they tend to happen towards the back end of the window. It's quite rare. It's not impossible. It's not like we've never ever seen it before, but it's quite rare for a free agent to drag on sort of towards August, really, as a general rule of thumb. It tends to be in the first half of July. So, yeah, I think we'll see probably a bit more movement in the next few weeks, probably on free transfer specifically. I would suggest, and yeah, we'll see what pops up and what happens. I think Diarra is a name that was linked. He was on a free transfer as well, isn't he? So he would come into that equation, and numerous others as well. So, yeah, I think it will pick up pretty swiftly after maybe not next week, but certainly in the next few, I would suggest.
Finlay with a few more questions here. Will Norwich sign 2 left backs, or will Montoya be given a chance? I'd imagine pre-season maybe is obviously around the corner. That might open the door on the answer to that one. Would you both agree with that assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he like other players, like a lot of the players coming back from loans as well, will be given a period to impress Tzolis, and that will probably decide a lot to do with transfer business and especially the left back situation, because if he does look like somebody who can step up to championship level, he'll save Norwich probably a good amount of cash that they could spend elsewhere and would very much value this summer. So yeah, I think it was interesting that he was in the photos actually the club put out this morning from the players being back in testing. And yeah, I think it's a similar case to a lot of the younger players, especially, where Tzolis will probably assess them before the future is decided in terms of for them personally, and also for how it impacts Norwich's inward transfer business.
Another question here from Finlay as well. Will the club recruit youngsters after the announcement of the new head of development? It appears that we need to recruit quite a few. I mean, Connor, just I suppose on that recruitment of sort of a head of academy effectively, where are we at with that? Have you got sort of any updates on that? And I suppose, the question there about bringing in younger players, it probably feels inevitable given quite how thin that squad looks.
Yeah, I think they're close now. I think they're close to an appointment. So I think it's probably one that we will see hopefully pretty soon. It's obviously with pre-season starting and stuff, there's obviously an imperative to try and get these guys into the building to try and shape policy and whatnot and strategies and try and implement those. And there's, I think, quite a bit of work to do actually with the 21 squad because they've let a lot of players go. I'd expect to see maybe a sort of drip of contract announcements as well around that group. I think players like Errol Mundle-Smith, who did very well last year, and Harry Brook, and people like obviously Kennebo, who's still hasn't been officially confirmed, but that's all but done. I would expect players like that maybe to be rewarded, and then there's obviously going to be a need to be a recruitment drive. I don't think any of the trialists who came towards the back end of the last season are ones that have signed contracts. So yeah, they need to sort obviously who's going to head up the academy before then going on to sort of filling holes in the squad. So yeah, I think obviously I would say there's sort of 2 recruitment strands to do there, and yeah, it's definitely one that they need to try and get going. I would suggest pretty sooner rather than later. But again, how much in terms of funds they have for that, I don't know. But what they have done very successfully is obviously built a lot of those loan routes. So the better players that they have gone out on loan. Whether that will be a policy they continue with will remain to be seen, because it feels like Tzolis is going to want a lot of them quite close to the first team, and he wants to run the rule over them to try and build those pathways and get them through. So yeah, which is why it's intrinsic really that you have not just a head of academy in place, but one that's really aligned and knows sort of what he needs to be developing, or she, and needs to be developing and pushing through to the first team. So yeah, I think we're getting there with that, and it wouldn't shock me if we saw something in the next few weeks or so.
Working the way through Finley's questions. Is the Stevenage pre-season game still happening, considering the cup draw? Yes, I think the tickets are already on sale for that. So, that one will still be going ahead. Any update on Kennebo? I think there's a small update maybe on that situation. Where are we at with him, and maybe when we can expect the news of his new contract?
Yeah, well, as Connor said, pretty much done, all but done. An announcement I would expect fairly soon, obviously, as we've spoken about. Players are back today for pre-season testing. They'll be officially starting their training regime ahead of the new season on Monday. So you think next few days, maybe next week, that deal will be confirmed, and that Kennebo will be confirmed to be a Norwich City player beyond his current contract, which actually does run out on Monday. So no surprise if that does come to a conclusion soon. But in terms of the actual material situation that they're in, it's not changed from where it's been for the last couple of weeks. It has been pretty much done, and we're expecting an announcement very soon now.
A few comments around Grant Hanley. Duncan Atkinson, why don't Norwich loan Grant Hanley to another club? Neil Luther, we touched on Kenny McLean before, so if you watch this when we finished, you can hear that part. Grant Hanley staying or going. I mean, given his performances for Scotland the other night, what have you sort of make about his future here at Norwich? Of course, that injury he picked up against Blackburn a couple of seasons back now sort of hasn't really ever quite looked like the same player. But then you look at his performance the other night, and he looked like sort of the Grant Hanley of old. So where do you sort of pitch him and his Norwich City future?
Yeah, I thought he was excellent in that final Scotland game, and actually the one before I thought he was pretty good as well. But I thought he was pretty clearly Scotland's best performer actually on the night against, it was Hungary, wasn't it? They all merged into one. But it was the type of game that suited him, wasn't it, in terms of physical duels. But that's the first time that I've watched him and thought, that's a high level of performance that he's produced post-injury. And I think there will have been quite a few people probably inside Norwich City who would have been really pleased, and probably Grant Hanley himself, because and we've probably asked some of these questions. We've certainly had some of these questions because we all know how serious an Achilles injury is for any player at any stage of their career, let alone when you're sort of the wrong side of 30. So there has been question marks about whether he would ever sort of hit those levels again. And it's a one-off basis. You can't get carried away with that sort of thing. But the fact that he's been able to get his level of performance there would suggest that there are no sort of caps on what he can achieve, and that there is maybe a possibility that he can do that. And if he can do it more consistently, absolutely, I would see a role for him, because when he performs like that, I think he's a very capable defender. Now, there's obviously limitations. When I talk about defender, I mean pure defender in terms of head it, kick it, block it, all of those sort of elements. Clearly, there's limitations in possession, but there are coaching ways that you can sort of negate those. Obviously, the fact they've signed Cordoba, left-sided, very capable in terms of his distribution, would square that off slightly. If they could then obviously structurally change a few things, so a midfielder dropping deep on the right, then there are ways that you can caveat that, as Norwich did when they won the title in the second season. For me, a lot of this hinges around his fitness, and there has been, and I'm sure there will continue to be throughout the summer, not real with any real substance at this stage, but there have been murmurings that he could be one that could potentially go on loan somewhere. And he's obviously in the final 12 months of his contract as well. So there's that at play. But I think if Norwich City can get him to that level that he showed for Scotland against Hungary, then there's a player there that still has plenty to offer at championship level. And I think I wrote a piece about that. So, yeah, I wouldn't write off Grant Hanley by any stretch of the imagination. But by the same token, would it surprise me if, come the end of the window, he had gone somewhere on loan? Probably not, in truth. I think it's probably all to play for, and I think he's one of those players. And I've written a piece this morning, and I actually put Shane Duffy in that, but I think you could put Grant Hanley in there, Kenny McLean, as we've discussed, Ashley Barnes. I think there's a series of players who have so much to play for in pre-season. It's quite unique in that sense, because I think usually we look at pre-season and probably shrug our shoulders a little bit, and it's all for fitness and how much can you learn from it anywhere. Well, this time you've got a lot of players that need to make an impression. You've got Norwich trying to implement a new playing style. This is going to be a really, really important pre-season for so many people, and Grant Hanley is absolutely one of those.
Shane, the NCFC, saying, how many loans are we allowed to use? I feel the loans window will be utilised, I suppose, quite heavily.
It's far, or it was, unless the rules around this have changed, and I haven't seen that, but it always was. You could have 5 in your matchday squad at EFL level, but in terms of how many you're allowed in your squad, that's unlimited. But you could only then take 5 into your matchday squad. So that was always the rules. Possibly could have changed ahead of the start of the new season. I haven't had sort of any look around on that, but that was the case, I think.
Kieran asking for Norwich to bring back Becky. I'm not really sure that he quite fits the age profile or bracket of what Norwich will be trying to do this summer. Unless he's available on a free or loan, then maybe it's a slightly more viable option. Jeffman going, has the Tzolis deal backfired for Fortuna? Last I saw, there wasn't any concrete interest in him and no intention of staying in the Bundesliga too.
I'd still expect somebody to pick him up, to be honest. I know the rumours maybe have gone a little bit quieter in recent weeks, but with the number of clubs who have already been looking at him, just the unbelievable statistics that he produced at Bundesliga 2 level last season, and probably the fee that he's going to be available for, given Dusseldorf's financial situation and how much they were able to get him for, the fact that they're trying to move him on quickly. I think, to be honest, that a deal will still be done and Norwich will still profit from that. So from a Norwich perspective, that's good news. From Dusseldorf's perspective, I think that window actually where they have to sell him for a certain price ends on, is it July the 15th? Yeah. So in a way that could be seen as a positive, because that means if they can get past that date without a sale confirmed, then it's an open market and they can create a bidding war and they can get probably a bit more, because I think based on the season that he had last season, the talent that there's always been, it's always been felt across football that he has. I don't think they'll have any problems selling him. So although maybe it has gone slightly quieter from when Dusseldorf initially confirmed the permanent signing and there was all this talk around him, I'd be very, very surprised if he's still their player at the end of the transfer window, to be honest, and if Norwich haven't received a little bit of an extra chunk from that sell-on fee.
Finley saying presumably Norwich will look at the Euros and Copa America for some players from some of the smaller squads. Kevin with a good question. What do you read into the latest Atanasio piece and also investing in the PGA now, looking at investing in other sports? Also, I read that he was disappointed that we didn't get promoted. I think there's another one around all of this other investing. Will he have the money to put into Norwich City? Of course, that was quite an interesting piece that Paddy Well documented this week on our channels. What do you sort of read into what he had to say, Connor?
Maybe I'm really I don't know what the word is, but I'm not necessarily surprised. I mean, he's a venture capitalist. They put money into different places. I don't really get the shock of this, if I'm completely honest. He invested in Norwich whilst he was the owner of Milwaukee Brewers. I know, because I think he said it at the AGM last year that he was very keen to try and invest in another club as well to try and help Norwich. And yeah, it doesn't surprise me. It's investor invests in things to be invested in. I don't really think that there's a massive thing to take from that, really. And Norwich was always going to be part of his portfolio rather than the main project. I think that's the reality of where we are with it. Obviously, by nature, if he can get that in a sole role where he becomes the principal owner, then maybe it changes and the majority shareholder in his own right. But that isn't the case at this moment in time. And yeah, I wouldn't worry about the venture capitalists and whether they have enough money. I think Mark Atanasio is doing okay, and I don't think he would be putting money in places that he didn't have it. So yeah, I don't read a huge amount in it, to be honest. And as for the promotion point, I think, of course, because there's now an investment, an emotional investment there, of course he will want Norwich City to win and get promoted, because we speak about this in pure financial terms. Where is it better for him as a businessman for Norwich City to be? Well, that's in the Premier League, because that's where the money is. That's where the stage is. That's where you do start to see an ROI, a return on investment, and all of those type of elements. So, yeah, and I think the fact, and we've suggested it a couple of times, the fact that he has supported Ben Napper in terms of getting that Jose Cordoba deal over the line financially. I think that proves that there is a real interest and willingness to improve Norwich, and he spoke about it at the AGM as well over a long-term period. So yeah, I'm probably a bit less nonplussed about this than other people. I don't really, it's not really something that has caught me by surprise majorly. I think he will invest and he will invest in other sports, in other football clubs, I'm sure, and that will happen just as he has with Norwich City, because and we see it so much in modern football now. It's owners who have portfolios of clubs and it's almost franchise of clubs around the world. So yeah, I think it's worth stressing he hasn't done that yet. There's obviously the Benfica stuff that doesn't seem to have come to anything. Whether it will in the future or not, we'll see. But who knows? There's upsides to that for Norwich as well, because there's the opportunity obviously for player trading. There's the opportunity for partnerships. There's so much sort of pros to that. There's cons to that as well. And I guess that's probably feeds into maybe your view of the world. But I think Mark Atanasio is an investor and he will invest in things.
Yeah, we're live for about another 10 minutes. So any last sort of questions, get them down below and we'll try and get through as many as we can. Stu on YouTube saying, as a lifelong Brighton supporter, you guys were definitely a target to achieve and better. Why has it taken you so long to use data-driven transfers? Of course, Cordoba probably a signal of Norwich going that way now. Under Ben Napper, of course, we know kind of his impact with data previously from sort of his career thus far. Are you surprised maybe it has taken Norwich quite so long, Sam, to delve into this sort of area, I suppose, of recruitment?
I don't know if it's really explicitly the first time they've used data, and I think any professional football club at this level will have some element of data involved in their scouting and in their recruitment in recent years. There's no doubt that it has stepped up, and obviously Ben Napper's background will lean into that, and the importance of data in his career up till now will lean into that. Stuart Webber did a lot of work before him in trying to increase the importance of data behind the scenes at Colney, but even going back as far as sort of Kieran Scott's tenure as chief scout, when he used to like to get out and watch players a lot, and it used to be a lot about that. The way that they would find players in the first place would quite often be data. So it has got bigger, and I think Jose Cordoba's signing is an important marker for that. But equally, it's not the first time that Norwich have used that. In fact, they've been using it for several years. I think just like everyone else, they've been trying to step it up now. And the difference between Norwich and clubs like Brighton and Brentford and some of the clubs who do it best is that they're now trying to get to a level that those clubs have been at for 6 or 7 years now. And that's where the gap has been created, and that's where they've been able to succeed. And maybe it's taken a little bit longer for Norwich. But yeah, I don't think this is the first time Norwich have ever used data. I don't think it's a completely new concept at Carrow Road. But with Ben Napper in charge, and with the principles that he has, the experience that he has, and just the way that the football world is changing, it is definitely something that they'll be using more often. And it's something that the smaller clubs that maybe don't have the financial power of the big clubs will have to do, because that's how you need to spot maybe some of the markets that are untapped, some of the players who haven't been catching the eye on the surface, but actually have been doing really good, consistent work in the non-highlight moments, shall we say. And yeah, I think it will be important for a club like Norwich if they want to try and bridge that gap and try to make the importance of the financial gap between them and others a little bit less. But yeah, I don't think it's completely new, even if they have started to step it up recently.
Well, I think you're muted, Adam.
I am indeed. Sam saying, do you
That's
guys
the most sense you've made all afternoon, mate?
It is. Sam saying, do you guys plan on visiting Belgium for the friendlies? Yeah, we'll be there on that one. So well worth keeping across our coverage. Tom on Facebook saying, if we have any major sales, do you see us spending cash on a replacement?
Depends on a few things. I guess the size of the major sale, first and foremost, and what you would hinge on that. Would I expect Norwich to go and sign a player of same value? No, I think that's the case. It will be a small percentage of that, really. So probably is the answer, but how much of it, I think, is probably up to debate. And then obviously you've got a decision over whether you splurge it on one player or whether you try and divide it up and maybe try and sign a few off the back of it. And of course, those transfer fees go into different things. They go into, they plug holes of debt. They go on to infrastructural improvements. They go into different areas of the club sometimes. So it's not just purely a case that, Norwich get £20 million for a player that then gets pushed and pushed straight back into the pot. That's just not the way businesses work, really. Will a portion of it? Absolutely, but it will get divided up and chopped up into several places for different projects, and then a portion of that will go back into Ben Napper's transfer kitty. So, yeah, how much of that, as I said, would depend on the major sale, really.
Robin on Facebook saying, is there any truth in Sargent leaving? I suppose nothing obviously materially happening yet on that, but given obviously Napper's comments, I suppose, and given, his profile maybe and being that natural number 9, you'd imagine there'll be a few clubs sniffing for him moving forwards into the window. Finley saying, can we expect any more signings from random countries like Cordoba from Bulgaria?
Well, I think that is almost in a way a similar point to the data one, in that it is about trying to find things that other clubs aren't looking at and trying to get there ahead of other clubs. Paddy did a really, really interesting interview with sort of data professional that people can see on our channels, where he said that actually the reason why Cordoba was available to a club like Norwich and why he was around the sorts of fees that they can afford to pay was because people don't look in leagues like Bulgaria, and that is the reason why Norwich are trying to find players in those sorts of markets. Because if a player like Cordoba was good enough to, or was at his level and was playing in the Championship, they probably wouldn't have been able to afford him. He might have gone for 15 million, or if he was playing in La Liga, he might have been 8 or 9 million. And I think it is all about just trying to find those sort of marginal gains and trying to make up that gap financially and doing things in a smart way that way. So if the question is, will there be more delving into smaller markets and less tapped markets? I think the answer is probably yes, if Norwich want the most value out of it. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see some more slightly random countries, even if Norwich have covered a large majority of Europe by now.
Dan Mayhew saying, will you bring it back the travel vlog / behind the scenes like last year? Really enjoyed them. I think that's probably something that will be on our radar. Lots of other good content, maybe, but with a sort of refresh and revamp coming your way into the new season. We had a little content meeting yesterday. Obviously, we won't give away any secrets, but there's some nice new content ideas coming your way into the new season. So that's well worth looking out for. Joachim saying, who will win the Euros? Is it coming home?
They're coming home, I'd imagine, pretty soon on the way that they've been performing. Spain or Germany for me, based off the performances of the group stages. But what does any of that mean? I think there are 8 or 9 good sides there. Probably
8 or 9, I think.
Probably chop England off that, maybe 6 or 7. But I think it'll be one of the teams in basically the other side of the draw that Norwich are in. England. Sorry, that's a Freudian slip. But England are in at this stage, so one of those ones for me. What about you, Sam?
I would love Spain, obviously, but it's not it's not in my nature to predict things that I want to happen. So I think Germany are looking really, really good. Whether they've got enough to make it all the way. I think France, even though they haven't looked great so far, just with the experience they've got of doing that and getting there in the end, I still wouldn't rule them out.
Austria are fun.
Austria are really fun.
Very good fun.
No chance they win it, but I do like them. I like Georgia as well, as I think everybody is in recent days. But yeah, if I had to lump on one now, I'd say Germany. But I've loved watching Spain. Obviously, I'm from Spain as well, so I'd love them to do well. But yeah, so that I don't get too optimistic, I'll say Germany.
We've got a few more.
What about you, Adam? You can't escape from the Euros predictions.
Oh, I think my money's always been on France. I know they were a little bit disappointing in a few of the sort of latter games, but I think given some of the players they've got in reserve, I think they're probably the ones to look out for. Global Bloodstock on YouTube saying, any news in Eugenio from Karabag? Is that something I've not seen that rumor? Maybe that's
No, I haven't. Unless they want to put it in the. I mean, I've just looked him up. To be fair, his stats. So in the
Premier League.
In that league, the 20 goals in 35 with 8 assists, and then he's got 5 in 10 in the Europa League. So I mean, he's done pretty well. I would imagine that, and 5 in 5 in another competition, which I think is the domestic cup. I would say that he is probably above where Norwich City are at this moment in time.
And Jeffman asking if we can have a Pink and Live karaoke in a pub in Belgium. I mean, I know Paddy Davids in the office.
The other lads would be fine with that, but no one wants to hear me singing. No one wants to hear me singing.
We'll put it to Paddy. I'm sure that he's a man who likes a bit of karaoke. I think he sat in the office somewhere, so no doubt he'll be put that to him later on today. I think with that, we're gonna probably sign off now. I've been going for about an hour. Of course, thanks for joining us on this show. Hopefully you've sort of got a little bit of insight there into sort of some of the rumours and links that are around Norwich City at the moment. Lots of other good content across our YouTube channel. As Sam referenced, there's a really good piece with Omar Chowdhury, a bit more of a data kind of driven insight into Jose Cordoba. Connor spoke to a Bradford reporter around Jonathan Tomkinson, of course, one that's going to be back in the building for pre-season, maybe one to look out for, whether he's going to get a place in Norwich City's 11 this season, or even amongst the substitutes bench, or whether there'll be another loan move. So that's well worth looking at as well. Obviously, of course, the fixtures are out this week as well. You boys happy with kind of the start of the campaign, I suppose?
Yeah, I'm not happy with the end of it. March and April are torturous in terms of travel. But yeah, the start of it's good. I think Oxford away, we're all up for that, aren't we? I know you can't make it, Adam, as things stand. So that's a bit of a blow because it's a new ground. But yeah, in the sunshine, free stands. It's going to be lovely.
Yeah, a little bit of a blow. Yeah, I've got a friend's wedding that weekend, so I've sort of tried to tell him that, is there any way I can get from Oxford to London in about an hour? I think he told me no. So yeah, that's going to be one to watch on Sky. So with that, we're going to sign off, Jeff, and saying have a good weekend. And of course, we wish everybody watching a good weekend. Of course, the Ping Plus app as well, free trial, $2.99 a month thereafter. Of course, the pre-season is pretty soon round the corner, so no better time to come and join us on that journey. With that, let's hope the sun comes out this weekend and maybe England can ramp up their performance level on Sunday night, because I think it's been a pretty tough watch, maybe sort of a little bit of a mirror image to some we've seen of Norwich City last season.